Welcoming everyone to a very special episode of American Joyride. I am joined today by Les Sandusky. He is a former Army Ranger. He's going to talk to us today about a wide range of topics. They're going to be very fun, also very interesting and educational. Les, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, first and foremost, I've interviewed a couple Rangers that were Rangers way back in the day. I'm talking 90s, late 80s, things of that nature. As far as I know, I've never interviewed someone who was a Ranger as recently as you were. So, how'd you find yourself in the Army Rangers?
Um, Long story short, I joined the military. I went through basic training, and then while I was in basic training, I pretty much was what they call an 11 X-ray. At some point, they choose whether you're 11 Bravo or 11 Charlie. I was put in the 11 Charlie bracket. I don't know the exact rhyme or reason how that happens. It's just like bad luck of the draw. A lot of people don't want to be Charlies. Um, but as I was going through basic training, I was kind of like, I need to get out and be some type of special operations. And towards the end of basic, just based on my performance, all my drill sergeants had recommended me for the Ranger Regiment. So they had me sign another contract right before graduation where I would go to, at the time it was called RIP, but by the time I got to RIP, it was then called a RASP.
So, what years is this time window looking at?
This is from 2009 into 2010 time frame, like towards the end of 2009 into 2010.
Perfect. And for people who might be watching this, I'm sure they've heard of maybe the Green Berets or they've heard the Navy SEALs and they've definitely heard of the Army Rangers. But what makes the Rangers unique compared to those other elite units you always hear about in the news and in the media?
I'm sure everyone has like a plethora of answers that make Rangers unique. I think that Rangers, for the most part, are pretty silent professionals. And I think that Rangers, for the most part, have a wide variety of skills that come through experience and not necessarily schoolhouses that are like passed down from Ranger generation to Ranger generation. And we are able to meet the Army's needs and the Army requirements for the Ranger Regiment, which is to be a direct action raid force that can conduct forcible entry missions anywhere in the world within a short amount of time. So it takes an individual that can think on his feet, or his or her feet nowadays. It takes an individual that can be pretty versatile in their actions. You got to be able to do more than just your part of your job, more than what's expected of you. That's why in the creed there's 100% and then some is mentioned. There's a very tight brotherhood, and to kind of put it simply, a lot of people would call, like, what Hollywood calls the Delta Force, they would call them the Scalpel, and they would call the Ranger Regiment the Hammer. And a lot of times when they talk about the Ranger Regiment, it's a lot of people describe it as break glass in case of emergency. So a lot of times when the world needed a rapid response, whether, it was in Panama, Grenada, or Iraq or Afghanistan, the Rangers were able to infill via the air and conduct a forcible entry mission that was successful.
I love the analogy of break glass in case of emergency. I've never heard anyone say it that way, but that is really an awesome way to put it. Now you find yourself as a mortar man. I've never interviewed a mortar man, so this is not just going to be a learning experience for the audience. It's also going to be a learning experience for me. So, what is your job explicitly as a guy on a mortar team? Is it to provide close artillery support? Is it to
No.
take out the enemy before guys come in? What is your job?
Just like I said, regarding 100% and then some, really the mortars are what some refer to as the bastard children of the Ranger Regiment. And if we're talking about the Ranger Regiment being a hammer, the mortars are like the biggest hammer organic to the Ranger Regiment. Now, you also have air assets and things like that that facilitate freedom of maneuver and other things for the Ranger Regiment that can drop bigger ordnance. But as far as what's organic to the Ranger Regiment, as far as fire support, the mortars are going to be the biggest hammer. And so what we can do is we can be used as a reconnaissance element and facilitate reconnaissance. We can facilitate suppression and just be well incorporated in what we call a symphony of fires. And so we're kind of, for the most part, we're tied in with support by fire elements. So a lot of your crew serve machine guns and your anti-tank sections, we work hand in hand within the Ranger Regiment. And we also have been known to, when a lot of the strike force goes down from casualties, to fill in those spots. And so when guys go down, we're next man up and take over those positions. We're very versatile. We've had guys leave the mortar platoon and go on and win or place in the top seeds of the best sniper competition. We've had guys go on and win best ranger, or come close to winning best ranger and place like first or second. And so, there's a lot of stuff that our guys are asked to do just beyond the mortar thing. But when it comes to strictly just mortars, it's really just providing fire support, whether that's direct line of sight, I see the enemy, or up to 7 kilometers away.
So one of the things I'm curious about is your rules of engagement, because obviously if you're doing CQB in a house, guy points an AK at you, that's green light every time. If you see someone in your mortar position, do you got to get on a radio and ask for permission to engage, or are you, if you're in an active war zone, is it you can fire the mortars at your own discretion?
Well, if I find somebody within my area, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to eliminate that threat with the minimalist means possible. So I try to engage with like, you don't show your whole hand. So it's like, okay, if I can take him out with a rifle, take him out with a rifle. If I can take him out with a grenade launcher, I'll do that. But if it comes down to it, where we have the horde coming over the ridgeline and pretty much death is almost imminent or something to that effect, where mortars would be required, then yeah, because I will not be able to support the assault force if my element is eliminated. So a part of the whole support package is understanding survivability. So if we are compromised, we have to fight our fight and kind of get on our radios or some type of communication device and inform the element that we're supporting that we are troops in contact and that we will be unable to support until we eliminate that threat.
That's fascinating. And if you get on the radio and you say we're in troops in contact, and maybe you're dropping mortars, maybe you're engaging on machine guns, how often will they put an Apache in the air or bring in air support in a situation like that?
Um, I mean, usually if the assault force is not engaged and those assets aren't being utilized, we can have an asset flex to our position. Many times we will have an asset with some sort of oversight to our position, where we are kind of being monitored just as part of our survivability plan. And so those people are, those enablers are pretty quick to respond. But then on the selfish side of things, we want to neutralize those targets. And that's kind of what we signed up for, is neutralizing the opposing forces of the United States. And so a lot of our guys will take pride in taking care of the threat themselves. So if we can do that by any means possible, that's kind of what we want to get into and kind of what we signed up for.
And we're the very next thing we're about to get into is you going overseas. But on that point where you guys pride yourselves on eliminating that threat, what's that like? I hear a lot of guys say it's just an adrenaline rush that's completely unmatched. There's nothing in life that can come close. I've heard other people say it's just business. I don't view it as anything other than business. I didn't get those adrenaline swings. For you personally, when mortars were falling or bullets were flying, did you get a major rush?
Um, I don't really know how to describe it. I guess there is like a rise in something and then like a come down, like you have maybe some chemicals inside your body that remain dormant until that situation presents itself. I do sometimes think about it like a dream, like nowadays when I look back on it, it's like, wow, was that even real? Did that happen? And then it did happen. So I think part of it is just realizing some of it's funny because you think about how silly you might have reacted to something like, wow, I was actually shaking a little bit while, maybe loading more magazines because I feel like I needed, this is even before rolling out the door or something like that. And those are different situations. It depends if there's like if you're just fighting a bunch of ragtag terrorists versus like near peer threats. And when there's like a near peer threat, that's where you get a little bit more of a pucker factor, is when there's adversarial air assets in your area of operation and they're monitoring you, that that they're trying to intimidate you. So, and when they drop ordnance, it sends like a different level of that through you, which I don't really think it's as enjoyable, but like at the end of the day, you're like, wow, I did that. I survived that. We all survived that. We took no casualties and they threw everything that they had at us for the most part. And so I think it's just like, it's all dependent on the situation. I think that sometimes you're just like, I don't know, it's kind of like going on a really fast elevator or something, like or a drop in gravity, or when you're in the airplane and it suddenly they drop altitude really fast and it sends something in you, but it's more constant, I guess, in the moment. And maybe the moment seems like it lasts forever. Some people want to be a little bit more reactive, and some people want to take a moment and set the conditions. And sometimes there's a time and place for each one of those. And as a leader, that's the challenge, is as soon as you start taking fire, understanding, okay, some of these men have seen combat, some of these men haven't. And now we're in a team and we've trained this. And this is so different from what we train. Because usually in the States, when you're training, I call it like 2-dimensional warfare, where I start here, I start walking that way. And for the most part, I start taking contact that way. And the threat is only like maybe one direction for the most part. And then you get into some of these real world scenarios, and then it's 3D. It's like a 3D warfare where you're moving this way, and then, oh, we might have thought we cleared that building over there, but a guy pops up out of the window over there. Whole time we're taking high volume of fire from this direction, but there might be an individual to our rear that we're not even hearing or having tunnel vision. So you have to have the situational awareness and the tactical calmness to say, okay, wait, okay, we have this base of fire laid down. Let me just check my surroundings to ensure that there aren't other threats that maybe they, because you're moving into these high populated areas. You're not trying to bother locals. You're trying to, a lot of times you're moving in at a certain period of the day where a lot of people are sleeping. And once the gunfire starts going off, people start waking up, people start walking out. Some people, they go, oh, there's some Yankees in town. Let's go get our rifles and pop out the window. And you never know. They might have an allegiance to the opposing force, or they might just be down to just shoot somebody that day. You know what I mean? Because some people, like, as we know, even in the United States, they're just people with a murderous mentality. So some of them, I believe, just chime in just because they can, so I would say that there's a lot to unpack with that question when it comes to how does it feel and all that. I'm still mixed on exactly, but for the most part, yeah, it's business as usual, and I never took any engagement personally.
Let me touch on something you just brought up there, because I'm fascinated to get specifics on this. So you were talking about near peer engagements.
Yeah.
How often in your time overseas would you say you were dealing with near peer engagements, and would all of those have been in Syria?
Yeah, for the most part, they've been in Syria. There might be certain near peer engagements in Afghanistan where you encounter intelligence. You either capture intelligence personnel from near peer countries and organizations that are adversarial to the United States, because obviously everyone want to get their finger in the pie and mess with us or develop on us what we're doing and TTPs and things like that. But also with respect to Syria. Syria was while we were engaged with our enemy there, the Islamic State. We had to form alliances with certain organizations that may pose a threat to some of our allies. So the SDF is highly comprised of Kurdish people. And I know the Turkish government sees the Kurds as a threat to their government. And so we would have to deal with the existential problem of, okay, we have an allied force operating in the area, deploying fast movers, deploying armored vehicles to our area, and we don't want them to engage our partner force because we need our partner force to assist us in wrangling up these terrorists that are in northern Syria. Now, at the same time, Syria is still what we would call like a sovereign country, but caught in the middle of a civil war. You have this Free Syrian Army also operating in the AO. And, you know, there's speculation that the FSA has ties to Al-Qaeda as well. And there would be certain, I guess, elements of the FSA that were cleared as not Al-Qaeda and some that were cleared as Al-Qaeda. And you also have the Syrian regime. You also have Russian mercenaries.
The Wagner Group, right? And didn't the
Yes.
Wagner Group, that's the famous, what was it, 2018, when they tried running up on an American position and got obliterated?
Yeah. So like February 2018, they came into an area that we were holding near an oil field, a Conoco oil field. And there was an engagement there. And I don't know the exact numbers because that's not something that someone comes down and goes, all right, guys, listen up. This is how many we got today. So I don't really know how, like, a lot of these dudes out there that are like, this is how many confirmed and non-confirmed I have. I don't know how that works because nobody at the end of the day ever came up with a clipboard and said, hey, Les, got another 25 today. This is going in your permanent record, you know? And I never like put those like things on the wall or nothing like that. I know that my job was to take ground and not give up ground or to capture guys, but I never was going around with like 1 little, 2 little, 3 little Indian kind of, you know, thing. So I don't know how that works, but I know that there was a large amount of regime and Wagner guys that were kind of co-located that experienced mass casualties on a specific date in February 2018.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can, anyone watching this, you can read all about it on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into Syria now because I want to drill down on this. I've never interviewed someone who's talked about the Islamic State in Syria. So, at
Yeah.
what point, or well, let me ask you this: how many deployments did you do to Syria during the fight against the Islamic State?
About three.
And
Three.
what's the time period of those three deployments?
About 16 to 2018.
Okay, so really fresh in the grand picture of things, not that
Yeah.
many years ago.
Yeah.
So you're going into a country now, like you said, that is a sovereign nation technically.
Yep.
Bashar al-Assad is still the sitting dictator of Syria. That's I mean,
Yep.
but he's the head of the government, and you're fighting the Islamic State. So were
Yep.
you guys given orders? Like, what do you do? Like, did the Syrian army ever try to get near you guys, or did they know you see Americans, you just stay the
Yeah.
hell away from them? How do you have so many different players?
Yeah.
How did you know what was going on?
I know that certain folks at the top were doing a lot of deconfliction, and I think they did a good job on that. But I would say that a lot of these near peer guys were what we call habitual line steppers. We're like, get out of our AO, or you know, we're gonna have to engage you. And I think some of them wanted to beat us in the race to defeating ISIS. That way that they could take away the political propaganda victory from the United States because they were like, hey, we did it. You know, we did it for you. Get out of here. We don't need you, or something like that. I don't really know. I'm not very articulated with those kind of words on a diplomatic level. I'm more of the knuckle dragger at the bottom.
Don't sell yourself short. So did you ever see like how close did you or if you know, how close did you ever get to like the Syrian military?
You can see them at range under various advanced optics, or see them using aerial assets. They've been pretty close. I know that towards the end there were some agreements made of like this is the line you're not crossing, and things like that. So not really, other than in February 2018, not really too much of the engagement going on there. As far as direct line of sight, a lot of it is using air assets to kind of see, okay, we got some guys over here, they've established an OP over there, we're being observed from over here, and just kind of articulating that kind of thing to our guys. Sorry, my dog's trying to get in here.
No, hey, we love dog. This is a pro dog show, so nothing
Yeah.
wrong with a good dog. Let me ask you about the Islamic State now. Could
Yeah.
you explain to our viewers? We have a lot of young viewers, people who are teenagers, maybe in their young 20s.
Yeah.
Islamic State, explain to the viewer why the United States military went into Syria and what they were exactly trying to do.
So I know the Islamic State has posed numerous threats and to the United States and its people, mostly abroad. I'm not aware of any attacks successfully conducted by the Islamic State itself within the United States. However, but they were influencing a lot of young guys to leave the United States and join them wherever the Islamic State is present. And they were also influencing people in the United States and Western countries to conduct acts of terrorism in their domestic home countries. We saw a lot of very largely televised domestic terrorist acts of violence within the country of France. And so the Islamic State posed a great threat to the United States, and this kind of radical ideological movement that was kind of sweeping the world. It was becoming very popular. They had a very good way of marketing themselves in like a Call of Duty kind of way. They did a lot of helmet cam kind of stuff. And so they were just dangerous in that regard. They were, they just posed a huge threat to a lot of people and to the people of Iraq and Syria, really. And we saw widespread ideology under the banner of the Islamic State. So you started seeing certain cells pop up in Africa. You started seeing certain cells pop up in Indonesia, and also in Afghanistan. So it became like another problem that we had to handle globally.
Let me ask you this because I'm curious about what an ISIS fighter was like, and it's a two-pronged question.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys I interviewed that were in the unit in the early mid 2000s when Iraq was really really bad, they said that they were a little taken aback by jihadis because if they arrested some of Saddam's guys, they just threw their guns down and like, we don't want any part of this, we give
Yeah.
up. But jihadis would start clacking off suicide vests. They would kill their own kids. Did you experience similar stuff when it came to ISIS fighters in Syria?
I think the ISIS fighters, it was all dependent on the individual. I think we really broke them very quickly, which was kind of amazing. They most of these individuals that join ISIS, and I would say pretty much 100% of the individuals that join ISIS are very weak men.
That was gonna be my next question. So
Easy to instill fear, because once it's very easy to walk into a village where everyone's unarmed and just start shooting. But once like your homie to your left drops and your homie to your right drops and you don't know where it came from, all of a sudden, all that stuff seems to go out the window, and they start taking children as hostages. They would wound children to slow us down. So a lot of it, what they were doing, it's like, you guys aren't real soldiers. You're just a bunch of thugs out here, running things. And some of them, like, you look at the situation in like northern Syria, which is like a little bit more impoverished. And then I guess as you start getting more south, like a lot more farmers and things like that. So I kind of understand if like a crew of like ISIS thugs comes into your town and you're a young, impressionable guy, and they say, here's a Toyota pickup and a gun, and you can take whichever of these females you want. And it's like, wow, I never thought I'd own a car in my life. And now all of a sudden, some guy is just calling you a team leader. And, all you have to do is instill fear in others. And now you feel respected, you feel powerful, you feel like maybe you're well on your way somewhere in your life. I think that's a lot of them. And I think that some of them as well had the ideological thing, but I think some of them just joined into the ideology because it's like, hey, this is a cool club. This is better than I was doing before. And then you have the complete dirt bags, waste of life, waste of space, which are guys who, I mean, you have to go through a lot of trouble to come all the way there from the United States. And we did encounter a lot of Americans and Europeans fighting on behalf of the Islamic State that we would capture or neutralize inside the battle space. And those people, I'm like, you have absolutely no excuse. You're not impoverished. You're not anything. You just hate people. You have a murderous mentality, and you should be eliminated. And unfortunately, a lot of those guys we couldn't eliminate outright because, we needed them for specific intelligence collecting. And so they would have to be kept and then face a trial. And a lot of those guys, I don't think were worthy of facing a trial based on, what they had done, the atrocities that they had committed on the people there in Iraq and Syria.
I love your honesty with that. I love your honesty with that. Well, Jihadi John, the guy that was doing the beheadings, he
Yeah.
was a British citizen, I believe, and they got him now. I mean, he got sentenced to multiple life prison sentences. But I don't think, to your point, I don't think anyone would have lost any sleep if that guy had been walked into an alley and shot. I mean, once you start sawing people's heads off, and like your point, he came from England. Like
Yeah.
he was like a student, I believe. Like
Yeah.
it's insane.
Educated, had opportunities given to him, and
So
decided.
you said previously in the interview you never took anything personally. It was just business out there. But I got to
Yeah.
ask because it's a little confusing to me.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for people to understand.
Yeah.
You're talking about like they hurt kids, they were
Yeah.
taking women. How do you keep it just business when you're talking about the savagery that these people are putting on full display?
Yeah. I think I just understand history, the human condition. This is an event. It's not something happening to me. It's something I'm taking part of, but nothing's actually happening to me. And maybe things are happening to me. I'm getting shot at, but that's part of the game. You know what I mean? If I was playing football, I'm not gonna get mad that I get tackled. You know what I mean? So I mean, I have a lot of I have buddies that have been wounded significantly where they've lost capabilities, and I've had buddies that have passed away in the line of fire. But I think in order to honor their lineage and honor their sacrifice is to not dishonor my uniform and my country by getting so personally involved that I'm going to provide a means of anybody to say anything bad about how our soldiers conduct themselves on the battlefield. Now, a lot of people are going to have their gripes with the politicians and the diplomats and everything involved, but I don't play any part of that. And I've always said that I am an extension of U.S. foreign policy. Where diplomacy fails, we're most likely going to go to war, and we can conduct ourselves in a respectful manner while in warfare. Now that means, that doesn't mean we can't be as violent as possible, because war is violence and you're kind of expected to be violent, especially as a ranger. I mean, there's like a viral Instagram reel about, if you call on the Ranger Regiment and you see something over there, you don't have to worry about it anymore because it's not going to exist anymore. And that's kind of what we're sent in to do. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be dancing and like lighting fires at the end of the battle. It's just like, it's just another day.
Right.
This is the team we play for. And we're going on to the next mission with a relentless pursuit of the enemies of the United States. And that doesn't mean I have to sit there and do a touchdown dance every time I shoot somebody. But, you know, it's all about that relentless pursuit and not wasting time, resources, or assets on doing that type of thing. Now, flip side of the coin, when you capture these people that you're like, hey, you know, they don't deserve a trial, like in the back of your head, you know, you're also thinking like, but also maybe they are providing something that helps us be more successful in our next objective.
Did you, when you would come into contact with ISIS fighters, would it be more common for them to start surrendering when you were laying waste to them, or would they kind of cling to the bitter end and all of them would go down fighting?
Some of them would cling to the bitter end. Some of them will clack themselves off. I think they kind of, and when I say clack themselves off, detonate an explosive device on
Right.
their person that would bring them to the afterlife. And then, but some of them, it was very weird. Like so we're kind of working with a partner force, the Syrian Democratic Forces there, and they would kind of say, "Hey, we've organized a surrender," and you think that like surrender means 1,000 guys are going to come across a bridge with their hands on top of their heads, like surrendering. It's like, no, the surrender, the terms of surrender was like, okay, like we're taking this city, do not fight us, and just leave. And then so these guys would get in vehicles, and we're like, hey, that's the terms of surrender that you made with the SDF, not the United States. You know, so we would like sit there in a lawn chair and coordinate strikes on these vehicles as they were leaving. So then they knew we were doing that. We're like, because we see them all mount up, and we're like, hey, just strafe that whole line of dudes leaving, because we're not. That's not a surrender to us. Like, you surrender, you become prisoners of war. That's just how it goes. And then after a while, they started putting women and children in the vehicle, so we couldn't strike. So we just had to follow them to the next area, and then, you know, start another battle there. And really, like, all the checks and balances on the United States part is far exceeds, I think, any other nation in the world. Like, leaflets are dropped, things are put there. Like, we would even say like, hey, we're going to be attacking, you know, in the area of this village. You have ISIS fighters here. Uh, you know, here's the terms of a surrender. This is how you surrender. If you do not surrender, you will be eliminated, like that type of thing. And we even say like, this is how you know we're here. And like, we would send like a mortar round like outside the city in like a big open field. And then like sometimes you would see people in mass with white sheets, waving white sheets, like just giving up right away as soon as that first mortar round hit, especially after the first couple of weeks that we were in country and they just knew everyone was getting devastated. um, a lot of them on the radios would start talking about, okay, the pigs are here, and that like a lot of guys would just give up like right away.
That had to feel good knowing that you could just drop one mortar and they wanted
Yeah,
no part of you guys. They
yeah.
wanted that has to feel good. Tell me it does.
It felt really great, and if it did feel good that you would also see women that were kind of forced into um, not just the religion, but the certain religious practices, because not all Muslims practice the same cultural things. So some of the women would be taking off their burqas and throwing them on the ground and stomping on them as we were moving through their village. And so it was kind of cool to see people have the choice. You know, I'm not anti-religious at all. I'm not anti Muslim or Islamic or anti-Christian, nothing. But it's good to that when people can have a choice and not be forced into a lifestyle that maybe they don't want to live. And that's what it appeared to be when we would drive through, that there would be several women that were taking that off and stomping it out, like, you know, as like a thank you for that liberation, I guess.
It's fascinating you say that because I just interviewed a guy recently who shot a guy that was used. It was essentially repeatedly abusing his wife in Iraq, and he said that when he killed that guy, the wife through the interpreter like cried tears of joy. Like she
Yeah.
couldn't believe how, I mean, he was stunned by how happy she was that her
Yeah.
husband had been killed, which is crazy to think about. Now, you've been to Afghanistan as well. Can you explain to the audience like what a key difference is between combat in Syria compared to combat in Afghanistan? Are there any major differences? And if so, what are they?
I think there are some political administration differences, and you can see them like you can even see them at the presidential level, where there is a difference between the Bush era, the Obama era, and the Trump era in Afghanistan, and then lastly the Biden era in Afghanistan, which is very short-lived as that war came to a close there. And I think that I was pretty late in the game coming to Afghanistan. Came to Afghanistan like 2010, and I just remember thinking like, okay, we're doing like some direct action raids. We're moving through. We have certain teams that we're kind of sweeping and living out of our rucksacks across the country. But for the most part, there's no real like line drawn. There are some like hot spots, like, hey, you know, Eastern Afghanistan and north to south on the eastern side of Afghanistan is mostly where stuff's going to pop off, you know, with respect to neighboring countries like Pakistan, or to the north, or you got like, you're kind of getting closer to Uzbekistan and stuff like that. Like just this like half moon shape. That's kind of, but still, it's kind of like a little bit of Wild West stuff. Like you go to capture a guy, he might have like a muzzle loader. You might engage a squad one day. You might engage a platoon size element. For the most part, like it's like all quiet on the Eastern Front for the most part. And it was a little bit more of a, I think it was more of a, I'm trying to find the word for it, but it's hard to govern. Afghanistan's hard to govern because kind of like how Mexico is hard to govern. Both countries are covered 75% in mountains, so you have a lot of these. It's very easy to conduct partisan operations as a terrorist organization, because you have like a centralized government in Kabul, and you have big cities like Kandahar, Kabul. You can go down there into the Helmand province and have some built up cities down there. But really, the most control you can have are over those cities. And so it's very easy to disappear into the mountains, disappear into caves, come out, do hit and run operations, these partisan operations, blow up convoys and things like that. And so you can have these small pockets of little tribes that don't even know the other ones exist. So you have Taliban, you have AQ, you have ISIL-K, you have even just random warlords out there that are just like, you know what? I don't know what you are, and I'm going to shoot at you. You know, you might even have a farmer that just hears 40 guys stomping around in the night in his field, and he doesn't even know you're American, and he might be pro-American. And he just hears something and trying to protect his family and fires off a round with his like, you know, single shot shotgun. And next thing you know, he has like 40 lasers pointed at him, you know? So that's like the difficulty there. I think that operations in Syria was, for the most part, in northern Syria is generally flat. I compare it to Kansas because, like during the wintertime, northern Syria is a pretty desolate, arid country. And then as you start going into spring, into summer, like all the green starts sprouting out of the ground. But it's generally flat. Seems like an easier country to govern. There aren't like huge mountains you got to climb up into. A lot of the areas you can get to by vehicle. You don't really need helicopters to infill everywhere. And we had a pretty good control of the northern side of Syria, and largely because we have developed such a great relationship and trust with our partner forces within the Syrian Democratic Forces. So I think those are like two key differences: is the terrain. The terrain makes such a big deal, and terrain can allow for those partisan operations behind enemy lines. It's like commando type stuff that like the Taliban or whatever, or Al Qaeda were trying to do. You know, they're able to retreat in the mountains after doing some very annoying harassment type operations that at least could instill fear into troops and like, okay, now we're going to be slowed down providing aid and getting to these other areas. And then it's hard to gain the loyalty of locals in the mountains because you can't be there all the time. And these guys are always there, so they're not going to help you. Not because they don't want to help you, but because out of fear that if they do help you, that they're going to face consequences.
Is it easy? And it must be way easier when you're in Syria to just hop on some helicopters if you want to and just fly directly to the target building, right? Like if
Yeah,
they're living in a house, it's not like you're going over mountains, you're going through rivers and shit.
yeah,
You could just fly right there if you wanted
yeah,
to. That for the most part, right?
yeah, yeah. For the
Speak.
most part, we were driving though, which was new to me. I'm used to, I mean, like, it's funny, you have to walk really far to be a ranger. And then, like, most of your career, you're just landing a helicopter, like, 500 feet from an objective and just running up on it. It's like, why did I do all that walking?
Um, I am curious because I know that you worked at the same time the Army SMU, the Tier 1 unit,
Yeah,
Delta was over there. What is that like to be working with that specific unit? Because
yeah,
let me preface it with this. I had a guy I interviewed from Black Hawk Down, and he said pre Black Hawk Down, the Rangers in the unit didn't really have any crossover. But
yeah,
post Black Hawk Down, they became unbelievably tight. You see that through the war on terror for more than 20 years where they
yeah.
work hand in hand. What is it like to work with those guys?
It's really wild because my first team leader in Syria was like, "Yeah, I used to be in your platoon. I jumped in Afghanistan, and I was a mortar guy." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're already, like, we got some stuff in common." But make no mistake, they let us know who they were and that we were different, but there was respect to, hey, you're the subject matter expert of what's happening, and we're here to facilitate you. So, like, the cool thing is like, you also had the confidence of, okay, I have my team of Rangers with me, but I also have these guys with me. So if stuff pops off, like, they're like protecting me while I'm on, you know, an electronic device conducting reconnaissance operations from the sky while also controlling my elements and giving you know, fire commands to my elements under me. And it wasn't just them. Like, we worked hand in hand with the French special operations and the British special operations. And it was really crazy to me how, like, at first when I showed up there, they made this joke about I was CID, which is like, the rats in the army that, like, they'll rat on you for doing the wrong thing. They're like, "Are you CID?" They kept calling me what's the guy from Point Break, Keanu Reeves?
Oh, I don't know. I know the movie, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't think of it right
The
now.
other
But
character's name is Bodie, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, they're
Oh,
Johnny Utah, right?
yeah, there you
They
go.
kept going Utah. They kept calling me Utah for a second, because they were like acting like I was this undercover guy. And they were, they're just like busting my balls, I guess, for like the first bit of it. But then they realized, oh, this guy's actually really, really, really good at his job. And then they started going like, what do you think we should do? Like, we want to do this. What's your plan? And I go, okay, I want this, this, and this. He goes, you can ask for more than that. I go, all right, can I have this? Yeah, you can have that. Oh, can I have this? And then they're like, okay, we can't do that, but can you take this? And I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is stuff that, like, from staff sergeant first class, and or my E6 to E7 while they're in Syria, I was thinking, like, man, this is stuff that, like, field grade officers wouldn't even get this type of, hey, tell us what you want to do. And, like, I'm literally like, let me take this whole battalion of SDF fighters and let's go do this. Like, an entire battalion. I want them over here. I think they should cross over here. And I would set up the whole plan as far as, like, my whole element. It wasn't like, you're going to do this and that's it. And I'd be like, fuck, this plan's fucked, but I'll work with it and I'll figure a way to make the best out of this plan that I don't really agree with. But instead, it was like a lot of pressure because, yes, a lot of the planning did fall on me of what we're going to do for that day. And a lot of the information that was given to me was very helpful to conduct that planning. So it's very cool how they were very open, but also, like, there's so many different characters there. And just like in the Ranger Regiments and Special Operations, I think the personalities in Special Operations are so big, but you have all these big personalities in the same room or on the same target, and then everyone's still coming together and, not trying to, you know, there was very rarely any forgive me, but there's like very rarely any Antonio Browns on the
Oh, I love
battlefield,
that.
like
That's an
big
amazing
personalities,
quote.
but but there are very few Antonio Browns out there. And so I don't know. I really enjoyed my time there. I went back and forth with those guys. I finished out my career. I never really deployed with the regiment specifically again after my first time deploying with these guys. I just consistently was on a rotator with them, supporting them with indirect fire support. And it helped me also grow as a leader. It helped me get a little bit better at setting conditions, being a little bit more calm, a little bit more tactical, a little bit more mature. And it was just cool hearing all these guys' stories and, sitting on guard on a rooftop in the middle of Syria, looking through some optics or a long gun, middle of the night, just shooting the shit with some of these guys. And you end up like, pulling a few hours of security at a time, watching ISIS come over the horizon, or sometimes friendly forces falling back after maybe, they lost a little ground that night. You see them falling back, but you're sitting there and you're kind of shooting the shit with these guys. I don't know. It's very interesting. We were just sleeping in like a lot of bombed out buildings or destroyed buildings or abandoned buildings. And you really get into this kind of, it's like the romance side, I guess, of warfare. Not that like you're falling in love with people, but there is a romanticism that goes with warfare, and the bond and the camaraderie and things like that, sharing a cigar or something to that effect. So, yeah, and it was very cool to see that guys at that element. People think that everyone at like the, whether it's at the highest tier of the Navy or the highest tier of the Army, they think these guys are all shooters. And it's like, no, a lot of these guys are just high speed enablers. These guys are specializing in reconnaissance. These guys are specializing in deactivating and finding explosives and things like that. And they're all pretty chill, down to earth guys. They can tell you when you're wrong in a very respectful manner. That could bring you down. They can help calm you down. You can help calm them down. And a lot of these guys, they were definitely there for each other and there for us. And all in all, it was a great experience. I can't say really anything bad about it.
Well, everyone who's come on this show from that unit, I agree with your assessment. They're unbelievably down to earth guys. The one thing that always stuns me is Hollywood gives you the impression that these guys are all Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've
Yeah.
interviewed a bunch of guys that might not be 5'7" on their tallest day, and they look like they just
Yeah.
got done running a marathon.
Oh
Like
yeah.
when they start talking about whatever it is they're talking about,
Yeah.
it's like a science class. I have the utmost respect for everyone I interview, yourself included, but some of those dudes, it's like you wouldn't recognize, if you saw them in a grocery store, you'd walk right past them. You wouldn't think twice. You wouldn't
Yeah.
even give them the time of day, which I think is kind of cool on the arm. At least the Army guys kind of have that less obvious appearance. Was there ever a time in your career on deployment where you were in a real bad situation and you started thinking, man, we might not make it out of this one?
Yeah. So I used to give this speech to guys even when they showed up uh to the battalion, because some guys, they show up, they're like 18 years old, 19 years old, and they show up and I'm like a can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear it. Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yeah. So like I'm like some of these guys that showed up and I'm like 30 years old, they're like 18. And I'll tell them straight up, like, hey, man, I've been in the Army 12 years. You just finished high school. Would that take you 12 years? So this whole time, I've been fighting wars and you just showed up. And that's not an ego thing. That's just to set the tone. Like, hey, there's guys with experience here that you can gain from. And some of these guys be very timid showing up. Like, they were probably some all-star quarterback in their high school. They might even be bigger than me. They might be smaller than me. And they show up timid because they're scared, because there's different reasons what they're scared of. They don't want to mess up. They don't want to lose your respect. They want to gain your respect. And, you know, they're young, impressionable men where it's like, my opinion matters so much. It could like influence their psyche so much. And I was like, look, I say, do you want to fight me right now? Like, that was one thing. I was like, do you want to fight me right now? And they're like, oh, no, Sergeant. I go, would you fight me if I started fighting you? And they're like, no. I go, why? I was like, they're like, because I would lose. They would say I would lose. And I go, look. And I would tell them, like, Rangers in World War II, 3rd and 1st Battalion went into Cistern, Italy, going up against an overwhelming force. I guarantee you not a single man in those battalions knew that they were going to make it out alive. But you know what? They went anyway, and they fought hard down to the last man. Pretty much maybe like all but 9 of those guys were killed in action. And I'm like, but you know what they did? They made it hard for the enemy to win. And if you fight with that mentality, like, I'm not going to lose, but if I lose, I'm going to make it very hard for you to win, then the enemy thinks twice when they see another group of Rangers out there. Instead of, oh, we just rolled them. You just quit because you knew you're going to lose. You had this mentality. And most of the time when you fight that mentality, you're going to win because it's just like, I don't care. Like, losing's not an issue to me. It like quitting is always an option. It's the most easy option to take. Like, people say quitting's not an option. It's actually the most available option. You can quit at any time. You know, anybody can quit at any time. And, you know, it's just like, just fight with, you know, no mercy, this tooth and nail until you're gone, because that's what's expected of you. That's like, though I be the lone survivor is how you close the Ranger Creed. And a lot of guys fight with that mentality. That's why, you know, you'll shove a guy out of a door and get in there first and, you know, start going after the enemy, because you're going to take that shot before anybody else does. And you're going to come in there with the tenacity that, you know, I'm not going to lose. And it's going to take a lot for you to take me down. So a lot of these guys, I was like, so if I started swinging on you right now, you better swing back, whether you think you're going to lose or not, because chances are you'll beat me. Like, who knows, you know? But I said, don't lose integrity. Don't lose respect for yourself. And, you know, just, and that's a lot. That's an example that I learned from those guys in World War II. Because of their efforts, the Germans had to pull a lot of troops from the Eastern Front in Russia and take these guys down to Italy and backfill them, which allowed forces from the East to advance more rapidly. You know, there might be holes in my history. I'm not 100%, like, I'm not a, you know, but that is a story that I would use, you know. And I do know that those 2 battalions faced heavy losses against an overwhelming force. And I thought that was very intriguing, to not just only focus on the most epic battles where the Rangers look like Captain Morgan with their leg up and an M16 in the sky, just, you know, invincible. It's like, realize the threat that you're coming into, that, you know, you could take the wrong step and then it's lights out. You know, you could take the wrong step and it's lights out, and then you wake up in a hospital somewhere else and you can't, you know, hold your child anymore. Understand that that's what you're getting into. And remember that the harder that you fight, whether, you know, your gut is in it or not, you need to put your gut in it, because the men around you are counting on you to do that. So you really have to, because Rangers, all special operators are human. I've seen fear in the eyes of the strongest men in the world, the most strongest will. And I've seen each of these men like nut the fuck up, get behind their sights and start putting rounds on threats. And that's really one of the most impressive things. And it's really a testament of their resilience and a testament of their will. And that goes beyond special operations. You don't have to be a commando. 762 will kill you whether you have a Ranger tab or not, or a Ranger scroll. It will take your life. It will hinder your abilities. It could render you disabled. And it takes an amazing amount of bravery for every person within the military to take that first step towards the objective, night after night after night.
I'm ready to run through a concrete wall right now. You need to start getting paid to give that speech, go around the country. You'd be a motivational speaker to high schools. That was incredible. Let me throw you a fun one. What's the funniest thing you've ever seen in combat? If you have seen anything funny.
I've seen a lot of funny things. Uh, some of them, I guess, are inappropriate.
Give us one that can be appropriate then.
I would say that firefight in a chicken processing plant.
In Syria?
Yeah.
And were there chickens being processed as bullets were flying?
Yeah, there were huge industrial incubators and things like that, and chickens flying around while gunfire is going off. So you're like, like feathers and things like that flying around. And I guess that's like one funny thing I could share.
So lay the scene. Why is there a gunfight happening in a chicken processing plant?
Well, there were members of our of the opposing force there, the Islamic State, that held up in there. It was a very well fortified barricade position. There are numerous improvised explosive devices in there too, so you did get to see a bunch of chickens go up at the same time, which was freaking crazy. But yeah, we drove them out of there relatively easily. It's just kind of funny. And then we kind of took it over as like a safe house for the night and slept in there. So it was just like creepy seeing these huge incubators there, a bunch of dead chickens and stuff outside. And I think we actually ate chicken the next day in the morning. Like some of the SDF guys cooked up a lot of the chicken and some rice and stuff. We had actually a decent meal the next day.
That is amazing. That's got to be one of the top 5 best what's the funniest stories I've ever asked in this interview series. That's incredible. That exceeded all expectations. I'm just envisioning that in my mind playing out in real time. It's incredible. This has been a great interview. I got one more question for you. It's what I love closing out on this question. When you look back, you said you're 30. Is that you're 30?
Well, I'm 36 now.
You're 36
when I was
now.
in the military, guys would show up. I'd be 30 years old.
So
age gap.
But let's say when you're 60, 65, 70 years old and you're looking back at your life from 40 years, 45 years previously, what's one memory that you will always look back at and say, I'm so proud of that one thing I got to do, whether it's a mission, whatever. What's the one thing that you'll always carry with you?
I think it's just being part of the battalion mortar platoon and seeing it grow. And seeing the individuals there that were treated for a while there like they were like these bastards, of the battalion, to where they were just this monument of respect across all 3 of the Ranger battalions, every mortar platoon, so above and beyond their peers across the world. Like there's nobody better at doing what those guys do. And just seeing them win best Ranger competition, winning best sniper competition, seeing them win all 3 first, second, third best mortar competition, and seeing those guys just thrive, and seeing how now their opinions matter, and seeing a lot of those young guys that I was kind of mentoring when they first showed up the battalion, seeing that now that they're in my position as leaders and they're doing an even better job than I ever did. And so to me, that's the best thing is knowing that I left that organization better than I found it, and it's only going to get better from here because the right people are being placed in those positions of leadership.
Well, Les, that's a great way to wrap this up. I want to thank you very, very, very much for agreeing to do this. And I had high hopes. I had seen your Team House interview, and man, you did not disappoint. You got some great stories.
Thank you.